Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Kit Saves the Day. Chapter 3, The Hobo Jungle. No, Grace, Kit said. You can't come with us to the jungle. Stay. Grace sighed. She sank down, her ears puddled around her head and her droopy eyes looking sad. Kit was sorry, but Grace didn't move very fast on her short legs and her splayed feet that pointed out like a duck's. And Kit was in a hurry. She and Sterling were just setting forth, and it was already late afternoon. Finishing her chores had taken longer than Kit had expected. Talking to the grown-ups had too. Mrs. Howard had said the jungle was dangerous, probably full of thugs and murderers. But luckily Aunt Millie had persuaded her that most hobos were just folks who were down on their luck, and that going to the jungle would be a generous educational thing for Kit and Sterling to do. Mrs. Howard flushed, but she gave in after Sterling promised not to eat any of the hobos' stew. Otherwise, she was sure he'd come down with some dreadful disease. Now, finally, Kit and Sterling were on their way with a flour sack bag full of food that Aunt Millie had packed. There were fresh tomatoes and beans from the garden, a can of stewed tomatoes, and a can of milk. Kit's stomach was fluttery. She was an honest girl, and she admitted to herself that she wanted to bring food to the hobos, not just out of kindness, but out of curiosity. The part of her that was a writer was always intrigued by new experiences. At last she had something interesting to write about in her newspapers for Charlie. She'd noticed everything about the jungle, and no matter what Mrs. Howard said, she'd taste the hobo stew. It was not long after the walk to Union Station from the Kitteridge's house. Very shortly, Kit and Sterling passed the huge front of the train station. They continued past the yards to the riverbank underneath the trestle bridge. There, almost hidden in a little grove of trees and low bushes, was a cleared out space of bare ground with a smoky fire in the middle of it. We're here, breathed Kit to Sterling. This is the jungle. Kit and Sterling looked around with wide eyes. Somehow the jungle was not as comfortable looking as Kit had imagined. There were a few tumble-down shelters made of old boards leaning against trees and a few dirty tents that sagged entirely. The people looked tired too. Some were washing their clothes in the river and then spreading them out on bushes to dry. One man was shaving, standing at a cracked mirror from a tree branch, but most of the hobos were stretched on the ground, hard asleep, their hats covering their faces. Someone was playing a soft, haunting tune on a harmonica. The air smelled of wood, smoke, coffee, and stew. Kit was glad to see Will coming towards her. Hey, said Will. Kit and Sterling, what are you doing here? Kit took the food out of the sack. We came to give you this food for the hobo stew, she said. Sorry we forgot before. Will grinned. Well, thanks, he said. Will used a sharp rock to open the cans. He lifted the lid from the pot, added the canned tomatoes and the fresh tomatoes and beans from the garden, stirred the stew, and gave Kit his taste. It was very spicy. In a moment, a woman came over to the fire and filled 3 bowls from the spot. Kit was sadly surprised when she saw the woman was bringing the stew to 3 very small, very hungry-looking children. One of the children was practically a baby. Will gave the young mother the can of milk. And then he looked at Kit's face. What's the matter? He asked. Kit said slowly, I didn't expect to see little kids here. Kit had assumed that hobos were people like Will who had chosen to live an adventurous life on the road. Now she understood that most of them were poor, lost people. Families with tiny babies even, who had once been settled and respectable now, but because of the Depression had no place to call home. Kit saw that a young mother's husband was asleep. He tied his shoes to his wrist. Why do you do that? Kit asked Will quietly. He's afraid someone will steal his shoes while he's asleep, answered Will. A hobo shoes are his most valuable possession. Can't get anywhere without him. Men gamble for shoes and fight for them too. Kit looked around at the other hobos. They were wearing street shoes, tennis shoes, old rubber boots, shoes with pieces of tire nailed to the bottom, mismatched hiking boots, even rags wrapped around their feet and legs and tied with a rope. One boy had taken off a huge old pair of 4-buckle galoshes. He also wore 2 pairs of socks, and he was stuffed crumble newspaper into the toes of the galoshes to make them fit. Another man was repairing his boots, which were very clearly too small for him. When Kit saw his feet, she was wearing heart-sick and a little ashamed of herself. The way her sandals pinched her toes was nothing compared to the way the poor man's feet were rubbed raw and bleeding. Kit's attention was suddenly distracted by a noisy group of men arriving in the jungle. They greeted the others and squatted by the fire. A freight train must have pulled in, Will explained to Kit and Sterling. One of the younger men looked up. Well, if it isn't Texas Will, he said, smirking. He pronounced Will, wheel, making fun of Will's accent. Hello, Lex, said Will. Kit could tell that Will did not like Lex. Who is this? Lex asked, pointing at Will and Sterling. They're friends of mine, said Will. They live just north of here. So, kids, Lex drawled, I bet Will has told you all about me, his old friend Lex, and how I'm the world's best at hopping freight trains. Kit and Sterling shook their heads no. He didn't? Said Lex, pretending to be surprised. Well, come on then, I'll show you how good I am. Lex stood up. Better yet, I'll teach you how to hop a freight. What do you say? Leave him alone, Lex, said Will. But Lex ignored Will and spoke straight to Kit. There's nothing to it, he said. The train I just got off is heading north. We'll hop and get off the first stop, still within city limits. It'll be a ride toward home for you and your little buddy here. He tilted his head toward Sterling. Everyone was quiet, waiting to see what Kit would do. She knew Lex was a braggart and not to be trusted, but a chance to hop a freight train was a chance for a real adventure. Lex is all talk, Kit, said Will. Don't let him bamboozle you. Lex still spoke to Kit. I'm not talking to you into anything, am I, Missy? He said in a wheedling voice. You'd like to try. I can tell by the look in your eyes that you're curious. Oh, but maybe you're afraid. Is that it? You scared? I am not, said Kit hotly. I want to do it. No, Kit, said Will. Hopping frights is dangerous. It's against the... But Kit was not listening. You hop frights all the time, she cut in. And you told me that lots of girls my age do it. How dangerous can it be? Kit lowered her voice and spoke earnestly. Don't you see, Will? She said, this is my one chance to do something exciting. I can't let it go by. She turned to Sterling. Listen, she said, you don't have to come. Sterling looked at Kit with his huge, pure gray eyes. Yes, I do, he said. Well, let's go then, said Lex impatiently. The train will be leaving soon. This is a bad idea, Kit, said Will, frowning. But if you're so set on it, I'm coming too. I gotta make sure you get home safely. Kit, Sterling, and a reluctant Will followed Lex along the riverbank under the trestle bridge and up a hill. They skirted the edge of the rail yard, making their way between huge freight cars and over a tangle of rails. Kit soon was so twisted around that she had no idea what direction she was heading in. At last, Lex stopped. He pointed to a red box car whose door was open. It was part of a train that was so long Kit couldn't see the engine or the caboose. We'll jump into that box car, Lex said, but you have to wait until the train moves out of the rail yard before you do. Kit's heart beat with excitement while they waited for the train to move. Finally, with a slow hiss of steam, the train's wheels began to turn, and the train chugged toward them, gathering speed. Lex ran along, ran next to it with Kit, Sterling, and Will following them. Then Lex grabbed onto a metal ladder attached to the box car and moved as smooth as a cat, swung himself off and into the open door. He made it look easy. Kit and Sterling ran to each other, staying even on the train. Then Sterling tripped. He started to fall forward, and for one sickening second, Kit was afraid he'd be crushed under the wheels of the train. But Will cut him from behind, grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and the seat of his pants, and tossed him head first on the train as if he were a sack of potatoes. Then Will swung himself up on the car, too. The train was moving faster and faster. Kit was a good runner, but she had to run with all her might to keep up the red box car. Will knelt down in the open door of the box car and reached out his hand to Kit. Grab my hand, he shouted over the noise of the train. Kit put on a burst of speed. She stretched her arm out, reaching and reaching for Will's hand. At last she caught it. Will lifted her up so she dangled, and then swung her so she flew through the air into the boxcar. Kit thudded against the hard wooden floor as she landed. "Are you okay?" Will asked her. Kit was too out of breath to talk, so he just nodded. Eagerly, she scrambled to her feet and stood by the open door. The wind blew her hair every which way, smoke stung her eyes, and cinders smudged her face, but she didn't care. Faster and faster, the train rushed along the track until the world outside was just a blur. Kit was exhilarated. She never moved so fast. She never felt so free. For a second, for a heartbeat, Kit wished the train would never stop. Then Sterling tugged on her arm. "Kit," he said urgently, led us in the wrong train. We're not going north toward home. We're going south, across the river. Look." Kit stuck her head out. Sure enough, the train was barreling across the trestle bridge, the tracks wheeling behind it, the river flowing below. With every click of the heels, Cincinnati grew smaller and smaller, and home was farther away. Kit whirled around. "Lex," she shouted, searching for his face in the dimness of the car. "Did you trick us on purpose?" Lex didn't answer, because just then the brakes slammed on and screeched to a stop. Kit held on tight to the door to keep from calling. She looked out to see where they were. The train had crossed the bridge. It stopped in a wooded area where a dirt road crossed the railroad tracks. Kit saw lots of men coming toward the train. "This is trouble," muttered Lex. He knocked Kit out of his way, leapt out of the boxcar, and disappeared into the trees. Will held his finger to his lips and gestured Kit and Sterling to stand up against and press themselves up against the wall behind him. Outside, Kit heard angry voices and the sound of fists and sticks pounding on the boxcars. "Will," Kit whispered, "what's happening?" "The train's been stopped by railroad bulls," answered Will. Bulls are men the railroad hires to throw hobos off the trains." He pulled off his cap. "Put this on," he said. "I don't want them to know you're a girl." "Why?" Kit started to ask, but suddenly she was blinded by a flashlight aimed straight to her eyes. Will and Sterling froze to the light too. "All right," growled a harsh voice. "Are you bums going to come out by yourselves, or do I have to come here and toss you out like trash?" "Come on," ordered another voice. "Out." Will jumped out of the boxcar. He turned to help Kit and Sterling, but one of the railroad crew shoved aside, grasped the two smaller children, each by an arm, and jerked them out so roughly that they fell on the dusty, rocky ground. Kit stood. She tried to brush the dirt off her overalls, but it just smeared. She wiped the hands on the seat of her pants. Outside the boxcar scene was a scene of scary confusion. Railroad bulls swarmed over the train, hauling hobos out of the boxcars, shouting and pushing the hobos in a double line. The railroad bulls carried out sticks and bats. Some even had guns. Sterling stood next to Kit, and Will stood in front of them, trying to shield them as best as he could from the bulls. But it was no use. One of the bulls rapped Kit sharply on the back of her legs with his club. "Line up, you bum!" The bull ordered. Kit spoke fiercely. "I'm not a bum," she said. "Ha!" scoffed the man. He eyed Kit's filthy overalls, dirty hands, and sooty face. "You look like a bum to me. Get in line, and be quick about it." He pushed Kit in line with Sterling and Will. "Where are they taking us?" Kit asked Will as they walked forward. "To town," said Will. "Keep my hat on your head. Hide your hair. If they see you're a girl, they'll separate us at the jail." "Jail?" gasped Kit. "Why are we going to jail? We didn't do anything wrong. We're not criminals." "Hopping fights is against the law," said Will. "I tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. And they put us in jail so they won't beg or panhandle in their town. We'll spend the night in the cell. In the morning, they'll put us on the truck and drive us out of town." "Spend the night in jail?" thought Kit miserably. She looked behind her to see if there was any way to escape. But the double lines of hobos, about 20 in all, was closely guarded by bulls on all sides. The pitiful parade left the woods and entered a town called Spencerville. As the hobos passed, the townspeople stared and frowned at them with dislike and distrust. The jail was a squat brick building that faced the town square. Its walls were thick, and its front had bars. Kit and the others were herded inside. "Turn your pockets inside out," the sheriff ordered them. Kit and Will had emptied pockets, and the sheriff let Skirvin keep his scrap of paper and pencil stub. Then all the hobos were crowded into a small square room. It had a concrete floor and one tiny window, but no furniture. The hobos filled in silently and sat on the hard floor, slouched hardly against the walls. Kit stood close to Will and Sterling. The wall was so cold against her back. Tears pricked her eyes as she watched the door swing shut and heard it lock with a hollow, horrifying clang. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.